The blade slides through rubber like butter, hissing air into the darkness of Maple Ridge's most pristine cul-de-sac. Margaret Chen adjusts her HOA president pin and steps back, admiring her handiwork for slashed tires on David Martinez's Honda Civic. "That'll teach him to skip tonight's emergency meeting," she whispers to her conspirator, Harold. But what they don't know is that David's security camera isn't the only thing watching. Hidden beneath his car, a network of motion sensors and wireless cameras he installed after the third random vandalism incident is recording everything. In 12 hours, Margaret's perfect suburban kingdom will crumble, and the hunter will become the hunted. Running his fingers along the jagged slash marks in his rear tire, the fourth incident. In 2 months, the rubber hung in tatters, deflated and useless, just like his patience with the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. "Son of a bitch," he muttered, pulling out his phone to photograph the damage. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Emerald Hills subdivision, where every house looked like it had been stamped from the same cookie cutter and painted in HOA-approved shades of beige, cream, and desert sand. His neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, emerged from her house with her tiny Pomeranian, shooting him a look of barely concealed disdain. "Language, Mr. Martinez?" she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Some of us have standards in this neighborhood, and everything he said would be reported back within the hour. Instead, he waved his phone. "Just documenting more vandalism. Fourth time this has happened to me specifically. Funny how none of the other residents seem to have this problem." The old woman's face went pale, and she hurried her dog along without another word. 20 minutes later, David's phone buzzed with a text from his ex-wife, Sarah. "Pick up Emma at 6 p.m. sharp. Don't be late again." The last 3 times he'd been scheduled to get his daughter for his custody weekends, his car had been mysteriously vandalized. Slashed tires, sugar in the gas tank, and once, his windshield wipers bent into pretzels. Each time, he'd missed precious hours with Emma while dealing with repairs. David stared at the message, his jaw clenching. This wasn't coincidence. This was psychological warfare, and he was losing. An hour later, David sat in the cramped office of Gomez Auto Repair, watching through the grimy window as his mechanic, Tony, shook his head over the Honda's latest wounds. "Man, somebody really has it out for you," Tony said, wiping grease from his hands. "These cuts are clean, deliberate, professional knife work. How long for the repair?" "Got the tires in stock, but I'm backed up. Monday at the earliest." David's heart sank. Today was Friday. Emma's weekend was shot again. Actually, Tony continued, studying David's face. "You know what? This is bullshit. Nobody should have to deal with this kind of harassment. I'll push your job to the front of the line. Have you back on the road by noon?" "Tony, I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. I'm offering. My kid's about your daughter's age. I know what it's like to disappoint them." Tony's expression hardened. "Besides, whoever's doing this picked the wrong mechanic's customer to mess with." While Tony worked, David walked to the Starbucks across the street and called his brother, Miguel, a cybersecurity expert who'd been pushing him to take action for weeks. "They got you again." Miguel's voice crackled through the phone. "Fourth time, I'm missing another weekend with Emma." "Enough is enough, hermano. You need to fight back with what?" "I can't prove anything. The police say it's random vandalism, even though it's obviously targeted. Then we make our own proof." Miguel paused. "I've been working on something. A comprehensive surveillance system. Motion sensors, night vision cameras, GPS tracking, the works. All wireless, all hidden, all admissible in court." David felt a spark of hope. "How much for you? Cost of materials? Maybe $300. But Dave, if we do this, we do it right. No half measure. We wire your car, your driveway, everything. When they come for you at dawn end, we'll have everything on camera. When can we start? Tonight, after dark. And hermano, this time, when they try to screw with you, they're going to regret it." At 10 p.m., David's driveway looked like a scene from a spy movie. Miguel had arrived with 2 duffel bags full of equipment, cameras no bigger than buttons, motion sensors that could detect a butterfly landing, and a central recording system that would store everything in the cloud. "The beauty of this setup," Miguel explained, carefully threading a fiber optic cable through the Honda's undercarriage is that it's completely invisible. They'll never know they're being watched. David held a flashlight steady while his brother worked. What if they don't come back? What if they've moved on to easier targets? Miguel looked up from his work, his expression grim. Trust me, they'll be back. Bullies like this don't stop until they're stopped. And based on what you've told me about your HOA president, Margaret Chen doesn't strike me as the type to give up easily. As if summoned by his words, Margaret's voice carried across the night air from 2 houses down. She was on her front porch, talking animatedly on her phone, her voice pitched just loud enough to be heard by anyone paying attention. No, Harold, we can't let up now. Martinez is starting to ask questions, and Mrs. Patterson says he was taking pictures this morning. If he gets suspicious and starts investigating, it could expose everything. David and Miguel exchanged glances. Margaret was speaking loudly enough that her voice carried clearly across the manicured lawns. The HOA emergency meeting is tomorrow night at 7, Margaret continued. Make sure Martinez gets his notice. If he shows up, we can keep him busy. If he doesn't, well, accidents happen in parking lots. The call ended, and Margaret's porch light went out. Did you get that? David whispered. Miguel held up his phone, a recording app still running. Every word. But audio recordings can be dismissed as hearsay. What we need is video evidence of them actually committing a crime. So what do? We give them exactly what they're expecting. You're going to skip that HOA meeting tomorrow night. Stay home, make it obvious you're here, and wait. David felt his pulse quicken. And if they come, then we'll have them dead to rights. But Dave, once we do this, there's no going back. These people have been terrorizing you for months. They've cost you time with your daughter, money you can't afford, and God knows what else they've got planned. Are you ready to end this? David thought about Emma's disappointed face the last time he'd been forced to cancel their weekend plans. He thought about the smug satisfaction on Margaret Chen's face every time she saw his damaged car. He thought about the way Mrs. Patterson had looked at him that morning, like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. I'm ready. The next evening, David sat in his living room with all the lights on, making no effort to hide his presence. He'd received the HOA meeting notice that afternoon, delivered by Harold Wimmer himself, who'd made a point of mentioning how important it was that David attend critical issues affecting property values, Harold had said, his beady eyes gleaming behind wire-rimmed glasses. Wouldn't want you to miss it. Now, at 7:15 p.m., David watched through his window as cars began pulling out of driveways, heading to the community center for the meeting. Margaret Chen drove past slowly, her eyes fixed on his house, clearly confirming he was home. His phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. All systems green, cameras recording, motion sensors active, just act natural. David tried to settle in with a book, but his nerves were too frayed to concentrate. Every sound outside made him jump. A cat walking across his roof at 8:30 sent his heart rate through the ceiling. At 9:47 p.m., the motion sensors triggered. His phone lit up with an alert from Miguel's surveillance system. 3 heat signatures moving through his backyard, approaching the driveway from the rear. David's hands trembled as he pulled up the live camera feed on his laptop. Margaret Chen, Harold Wimmer, and a third figure David didn't recognize were creeping toward his car, moving with the practiced stealth of people who'd done this before. Margaret carried a large knife. Harold had what looked like a small crowbar. And the third person, a heavy-set man in a dark hoodie, carried a bag of what David suspected was sugar. Holy shit, David whispered, watching as the trio surrounded his Honda. They're actually doing it. Margaret gestured silently to the others, pointing to specific parts of the car. This was choreographed, planned. They'd done this before, probably. Multiple times, Harold knelt beside the front tire, crowbar in hand, while Margaret moved to the rear. The third man began unscrewing the gas cap. David's phone buzzed with another text from Miguel, recording everything. Don't interfere. Let them finish. It was agony watching them destroy his car again, but David forced himself to remain still. This was bigger than one night's damage. This was about ending the harassment forever. Margaret's knife pierced the rear tire with a soft hiss. Harold's crowbar did the same to the front. The third man poured sugar into the gas tank with the efficiency of some Detective Sarah Kowalski had seen her share of suburban drama in 15 years with the Maple Ridge Police Department, but nothing quite like the surveillance footage playing on her laptop screen. Margaret Chen, respected HOA president and pillar of the community, systematically destroying David Martinez's car with the precision of a professional vandal. This is the 4th documented incident. David nodded, sitting across from her in the sterile interview room. That I know of, there might be more. And you believe this was orchestrated to prevent you from seeing your daughter. Every incident happened right before my custody weekends. Every single one. David's voice cracked slightly. They figured out my schedule and used it against me. Detective Kowalski made notes, her expression growing darker with each detail. Mr. Martinez, what I'm seeing here goes beyond simple vandalism. This is organized harassment, possibly conspiracy. And when they entered your home with weapons, she looked up from her notes. We're talking about multiple felonies. 3 hours later, David walked out of the police station into the bright morning sunlight. Feeling lighter than he had in months, Margaret Chen was being held on charges of criminal mischief, breaking and entering, and assault with a deadly weapon. Harold Wimmer had been released on bail but was cooperating with police. The third man, identified as Margaret's brother-in-law, Rick Chen, was still at large. David's phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. Check the neighborhood Facebook page. You're going to want to see this. The Maple Ridge Community Forum was in absolute chaos. The post at the top shared over 200 times in the past hour. It was a video clip from David's surveillance system showing Margaret Chen slashing his tires. The comments section was a battlefield. I knew something was wrong with that woman, wrote Jennifer Walsh from Elm Street. She fined me $500 for having my trash cans out 15 minutes early. This explains why the Hendersons moved so suddenly, added Mike Torres. Margaret was harassing them about their fence height for months. But not everyone was sympathetic. Mrs. Patterson had posted a long screed defending Margaret. There are 2 sides to every story. Mr. Martinez has been a problem resident since day one. Sometimes drastic measures are necessary to maintain community standards. The response was swift and brutal. A dozen residents piled on, sharing their own stories of Margaret's harassment. Late-night property inspections, trumped-up violations, threats of lawsuits over minor infractions. David scrolled through the comments, his anger building. He wasn't Margaret's only victim. He was just the one who'd finally fought back. His phone rang, Sarah, his ex-wife. I saw the news, she said without preamble. Is it true about the HOA president? Every word. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. David, I owe you an apology. When you kept having car trouble on your weekends, I thought you were making excuses. I know what you thought. I should have believed you. I should have ... double quotes, she sighed. Emma's been asking why she can't see her daddy as much. I told her you were busy with work. David's chest tightened. What do you want me to tell her? Truth, that some bad people were trying to hurt you. After they hung up, David sat in his car for a long time, processing everything. The vindication felt good, but the cost had been enormous. Months of stress, thousands of dollars in repairs, and worst of all, missed time with Emma that he could never get back. His phone rang again. This time, it was a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Martinez, this is Rebecca Foster from Channel 7 News. I'd like to speak with you about the HOA scandal that's been breaking on social media. David's first instinct was to hang up, but then he thought about all the other residents who'd been too afraid to speak up, all the people Margaret had bullied into silence. I'll talk, he said, but I want to do it right. This isn't just about me. By 3 p.m., David's driveway was crawling with news vans. Rebecca Foster, a sharp-eyed reporter in her 30s, had done her homework. She'd tracked down 6 other residents who'd been harassed by Margaret Chen, and their stories painted a picture of systematic abuse of power. Mrs. Chen would drive by my house multiple times a day, testified Janet Rodriguez. Any excuse to write a violation, she tried to force me to remove my rose bushes, added elderly Mr. Patterson, no relation to Margaret's ally, said they were non-conforming plant species. I've been growing roses for 40 years. The most damning testimony came from Tom Bradley, a former HOA board member who'd resigned in protest 6 months earlier. Margaret ran that board like a dictatorship, he told the camera. She'd manufacture emergencies to call special meetings. then make major decisions with just her and Harold present. Anyone who questioned her got targeted for harassment, property violations, mostly. But she kept files on every resident, personal information, work schedules, family situations. She knew exactly how to hit people where it would hurt most. David felt his blood turn cold. She knew my custody schedule. She knew everyone's business. Margaret Chen turned the HOA into her personal intelligence network. The interview wrapped up just as Detective Kowalski arrived with a search warrant for Margaret's house. David watched from his driveway as officers carried out boxes of files, hard drives, and what looked like surveillance equipment. "Mr. Martinez," Detective Kowalski called out, "you might want to see this." She led him to Margaret's home office, where the walls were covered with photos and documents, schedules, license plate numbers, family information, even medical records obtained through unknown means. "This isn't an HOA president," Detective Kowalski said grimly. "This is a stalker with legal authority." In the center of the wall was a detailed map of the neighborhood, with different houses marked in red, yellow, and green. David's house was circled in red, with notes scrawled in Margaret's handwriting. "Problem resident. Escalate harassment. Target custody schedule." "How many red houses are there?" David asked. Detective Kowalski counted. "Mr. Martinez, I need you to understand something. We're looking at potential wire fraud, identity theft, abuse of authority, and possibly federal charges if she was intercepting mail or using HOA funds for personal surveillance." David stared at the wall of evidence, feeling sick. "How long has this been going on based on the dates on these files?" "At least 3 years, maybe longer." The Channel 7 story had gone live, and it was spreading like wildfire. #HOAGate was trending on social media, with residents from other communities sharing their own horror stories. But the message that made David's blood run cold was a direct text from an unknown number. "You think you've won? This is bigger than Margaret. Much bigger. Watch your back." David forwarded the message to Detective Kowalski, then called Miguel. "I'm coming over," Miguel said before David could speak. "I saw the news. This isn't over." "What do you mean?" Margaret Chen wasn't working alone. Someone with serious resources was backing her operation. David felt the temporary relief of justice drain away. That's what we need to find out. But Dave, if I'm right, Margaret was just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole network of people involved in this. As the sun set over Maple Ridge, David stood in his living room watching the news crews pack up. The story was far from over. And he was beginning to understand that he'd kicked a hornet's nest that was much bigger than one corrupt HOA president. His phone rang. "Sarah again, turn on Channel 7, she said. "Now?" David grabbed the remote and switched to the news. Rebecca Foster was standing in front of Margaret Chen's house, her expression grave. "Breaking news in the Maple Ridge HOA scandal," she announced. "Police have discovered evidence suggesting a network of HOA officials across 3 counties may have been involved in systematic harassment of residents, a shadow network of suburban vigilantes." David's phone started buzzing with calls from numbers he didn't recognize. Reporters, he realized. The story was going national. But the call that made his hands shake was from Detective Kowalski. "Mr. Martinez, we have a problem. Margaret Chen posted bail an hour ago. She's been released pending trial." "What, how?" "Someone posted a $500,000 bond. Cash, we're trying to track down who, but... Detective Kowalski's voice was tense. "Mr. Martinez, I need you to be very careful. Margaret Chen is dangerous, and now she's desperate. People with nothing left to lose make very bad decisions." David looked out his window at the quiet suburban street, wondering which of his neighbors might be watching him, which ones might be part of whatever network Margaret had be. Miguel arrived at David's house at 11 p.m. with enough surveillance equipment to stock a spy shop. "If we're doing this," Miguel said, hauling a duffel bag toward the front door, "we're doing it right." David helped carry the equipment inside, his mind racing. "What exactly are we up against? Based on the gear I saw in the police photos from Margaret's house, this is bigger than we thought." Miguel began unpacking devices David didn't recognize. That surveillance equipment wasn't consumer grade. Government agencies, possibly, but more likely corporate espionage. Someone's been using HOA positions to gather intelligence on residents, and I think I know why. Miguel pulled out his laptop and connected it to a portable server. "I've been doing some digging since yesterday. Want to know what all 14 red houses on Margaret's map have in common?" David leaned over his brother's shoulder as Miguel pulled up property records, tax assessments, and real estate transactions. "They're all sitting on prime real estate," Miguel continued. "Corner lots, large parcels, properties with development potential. And here's the kicker: in the past 2 years, 8 of the 14 have been sold under market value." "Sold to who?" "That's where it gets interesting. Shell companies, all of them. But if you dig deep enough, they all trace back to one source." Miguel's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Emerald Hills Development Corporation." David stared at the screen. "That's the company that built this subdivision. They're buying back properties at below-market prices. They were trying to make people's lives miserable enough to leave." David felt a chill run down his spine. "So what happens now that I've exposed them?" Before Miguel could answer, both men heard the sound of breaking glass from the kitchen. They froze, listening. Footsteps on broken glass, moving carefully, but not trying to be silent. Miguel grabbed a baseball bat from his equipment bag and motioned for David to stay back. But David was already moving toward the kitchen, his own bat in hand. 72 hours was generous. David recognized the voice: Rick Chen, Margaret's brother-in-law who'd escaped during the arrest. But he wasn't alone. David could hear at least 2 other people moving through his house. "Mr. Martinez," another voice called out, this one with a slight accent David couldn't place. "My name is Victor Petrov. I represent certain business interests in this community. We need to talk." "I'm calling the police," David shouted back. "I'm afraid that won't be possible." Miguel held up his phone, showing David the screen. No signal. They were being jammed. "You've caused us considerable trouble," Victor continued, his voice getting closer. "The news coverage, the police investigation, very inconvenient for our operations." David and Miguel crept toward the living room, staying low. Through the doorway, David could see 3 men in dark clothing. Rick Chen, a tall man with Slavic features who must be Victor, and a third man David didn't recognize. "However," Victor continued, "we're prepared to be reasonable. You pack up tonight, you leave Maple Ridge, and we'll make sure you're compensated for your inconvenience." "How much?" David called out, buying time while Miguel set up what looked like a signal booster. $50,000 cash, more than enough to start over somewhere else. Miguel got his device working and immediately began live streaming to multiple social media platforms. David could see the viewer count climbing rapidly. "And if I refuse?" Victor's laugh was cold. "Mr. Martinez, you've already seen what happens to people who don't cooperate with community standards. You mean Margaret's harassment campaign?" Margaret was an amateur, a useful idiot who got carried away with her authority. "We prefer more direct methods." David felt his phone vibrate. Miguel had managed to get a signal through and was texting him, "Stall them. Police coming. Stream is live, thousands watching." "Tell me about Emerald Hills Development," David said, moving slightly, so he'd be visible on Miguel's hidden camera. "How long have you been forcing people to sell?" Victor stepped into the living room, and David got his first clear look at the man. "You're very well informed, Mr. Martinez." "Yes, we've been acquiring strategic properties in this area. The city council is planning to rezone this entire district for commercial development, prime real estate that will be worth 10 times its current value. So you used the HOA to terrorize people into selling cheap. We provided them with incentives to relocate. Margaret's methods were crude but effective, until you decided to be a hero." Rick Chen stepped forward, crowbar in hand. "Enough talking, we gave him a chance." But Victor held up a hand. "Mr. Martinez, I'm going to ask you one more time. Take the money, leave quietly. Everyone wins." David looked at Miguel's phone screen. The live stream had over 10,000 viewers now, and the comments were exploding with people taking screenshots and calling police. "Counteroffer," David said. "You and your crew get the hell out of my house, and maybe I don't press charges for breaking and entering." Victor's expression didn't change, but David caught the slight hand signal he made to his companions. "Miguel, get down," David shouted, up, connecting with Rick's ribs. The man doubled over. Years of martial arts training paid off as Miguel swept the attacker's legs and sent him crashing into the coffee table. With panic, people were calling for police. posting screenshots of Victor's face and sharing the stream across every social media platform. "You're making a mistake," David said, his hands raised. "This is being broadcast live. Thousands of people are watching. You can't just, 'I can do whatever I want,'" Victor snarled. "And you're about to learn what happens to people who interfere with my business." But as Victor raised the gun, David heard the most beautiful sound in the world: police sirens, multiple units, getting closer by the second. Victor's eyes widened as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. He'd just threatened to murder someone on live television, with thousands of witnesses. "This isn't over," he said, backing toward the kitchen. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." "Actually," David said, "I think I do." The front door exploded inward as SWAT officers stormed the house. Victor dropped his gun and raised his hands, but Rick Chen tried to run. He made it 3 steps before being tackled by 2 officers. As the chaos settled, Detective Kowalski appeared in the doorway, looking grim. "Mr. Martinez, are you hurt?" "We're fine, but, Detective, you need to see this." David handed her Miguel's phone, which was still live streaming. Everything they said, everything they admitted, all recorded. And it went out to about 15,000 people. Detective Kowalski looked at the phone, then at Victor, who was being read his rights. "Victor Petrov," she said. "We've been looking for you for a long time. Multiple states, multiple charges, real estate fraud, extortion, conspiracy." Victor glared at David. "You have no idea what you've done. This organization is bigger than you can imagine." "Then maybe it's time to imagine smaller," David replied. As Victor was led away in handcuffs, David felt a mixture of relief and dread. They'd won this battle, but Victor's words echoed in his mind. Most wanted list of some very dangerous people. Watch your back. But this time, David wasn't afraid. He looked at Miguel, who was already analyzing the surveillance footage they'd captured, and at Detective Kowalski, who was coordinating with federal agents who'd apparently been tracking Victor for months. "Miguel," David said, "how many other communities do you think they're operating in?" "Based on what I've seen tonight, dozens, maybe hundreds. This is a national network." David nodded. "Then we're going to shut them all down. Mr. Martinez, I just got off the phone with the FBI. They want to talk to you about going undercover." "Undercover?" "They've been investigating this network for 2 years, but they've never had anyone on the inside." David looked around his destroyed living room, thinking about Emma, about all the other families being terrorized by this organization. What would I have to do? Every corrupt official from here to California. David didn't hesitate. "I'm in," as the FBI agents arrived. 3 weeks later, David sat in a sterile FBI conference room in downtown Phoenix, staring at a wall covered with photographs, property maps, and organizational charts that looked like something out of a crime drama. Special Agent Rebecca Torres, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, pointed to a web of connections, linking HOA officials across 7 states. But until your livestream, never had direct evidence of their methods. David studied the photos. Margaret Chen's face was there, connected by red string to Victor Petrov, who in turn connected to dozens of other faces. HOA presidents, real estate developers, city council members, even a few judges. How big is this thing? Bigger than we initially thought. Conservative estimate, they've fraudulently acquired over $2 billion in property across 7 states. But David, what makes this operation particularly dangerous is how legitimate it looks from the outside. Agent Torres clicked a remote, and the wall screen showed a presentation titled Emerald Hills Development Community Revitalization Initiative. They market themselves as community improvers. They identify undervalued neighborhoods with development potential, then systematically harass residents into selling below market value. Once they control enough properties, they petition local governments for rezoning, and the local governments cooperate. When a respectable development company comes in promising jobs and tax revenue, most city councils don't ask hard questions. Miguel, who'd been cleared to participate as a technical consultant, pulled up data on his laptop. "I've been analyzing their pattern. They target communities with weak local governments and elderly populations, people who are less likely to fight back or understand their rights." David felt sick. How many families have they destroyed? Hundreds, maybe thousands. Forced relocations, financial ruin, destroyed communities. Agent Torres's expression hardened. "Which is why we need your help to stop them." She handed David a thick folder. "David Martinez, meet your new identity. You're now David Morales, a divorced IT consultant looking to relocate after a messy custody battle. You have just enough money to buy a house in Sunset Meadows, a community. In Nevada, that's their next target." David opened the folder. Birth certificate, credit history, employment records. Your new identity is bulletproof. Morales has existed for 35 years and has no connection to David Martinez or the Maple Ridge incident. What's my mission? Get elected to the Sunset Meadows HOA board. Document their harassment tactics. Identify key players in the network. And most importantly, Agent Torres leaned forward, her expression intense. Find out who's really running this operation. Victor Petrov was middle management. Someone above him is coordinating this entire network. Miguel looked concerned. How dangerous is this? These people have already tried to kill him once. David Morales has no reason to be on their radar. He's just another potential victim. Agent Torres paused. But David, I won't lie to you. If they figure out who you really are, you'll be in serious danger. David thought about Emma, about the way she'd looked at him with pride when he'd explained how he'd caught the bad people who were hurting him. When do I start? Tomorrow. You're flying to Vegas to house hunt. We've already arranged for you to view several properties in Sunset Meadows. Sunset Meadows looked exactly like Maple Ridge. The same beige houses, the same manicured lawns, the same oppressive sense of enforced conformity. David pulled his rental car into the driveway of 1247 Desert Rose Lane, a modest 3-bedroom house that would serve as his base of operations. His real estate agent, FBI agent Jennifer Walsh, met him at the door with a bright smile and a clipboard full of fake paperwork. Mr. Morales, they walked through the house, keeping up the charade for any watching neighbors, while Agent Walsh briefed him on the local situation. The current HOA president is Patricia Hoffman, she said quietly while pretending to show him the master. Vedra, 63 years old, retired teacher, been in the position for 2 years. Before that, she was known as a reasonable, well-liked resident. What changed? Emerald Hills Development bought several properties in the neighborhood about 18 months ago. Shortly after, Patricia's personality did a complete 180. David recognized the pattern. They got to her. That's our theory. But we need proof, and we need to know how they're converting normal people into their enforcers. After Agent Walsh left, David spent the evening setting up surveillance equipment that Miguel had disguised as everyday household items. His phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. Package delivered to your back door. Welcome to Sunset Meadows Surveillance Central. David found a cardboard box containing what looked like gardening supplies, but was actually the most sophisticated surveillance kit he'd ever seen. Soil moisture sensors that doubled as motion detectors, sprinkler heads with cameras, even a garden. Gnome with a directional microphone. As he was setting up the equipment, his doorbell rang. David checked the new surveillance feed. A woman in her 60s stood on his porch, holding a casserole dish and wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Morales, I'm Patricia Hoffman, HOA president. Welcome to Sunset Meadows. David opened the door, forcing his own smile. Ms. Hoffman. How thoughtful, please. Come in. Patricia stepped inside, her eyes immediately scanning the room with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. I hope you don't mind, but I like to personally welcome new residents and make sure they understand our community guidelines. Of course, I appreciate a well-run neighborhood. Excellent. Patricia's smile became more genuine. You'd be surprised. How many people move in without understanding the importance of maintaining property values and community standards? David nodded enthusiastically. I was on the board in my previous community. Before my divorce? Patricia's eyes lit up with interest. Really? We're always looking for engaged residents. Health issues. David felt a chill. He'd bet money that the previous treasurer had been harassed into resigning. I'd be very interested in serving the community, he said. What would the responsibilities involve? Oh, the usual. Financial oversight, violation, enforcement, working with our development partners on community improvement projects. Full potential. Emerald Hills. I think I've heard of them. Wonderful company. David kept his expression neutral, but inside he was recording every word. That sounds very progressive. We prefer the term proactive. Mr. Morales, I think you and I are going to get along very well. After Patricia left, David immediately called his FBI handler using a secure phone Miguel had provided. Agent Torres, it's David. I'm in. That was fast. Patricia Hoffman just offered me a board position, and she practically confessed to property targeting. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. Be careful, David. Overconfidence can be dangerous, both for them and for you. What's my next move? Accept the position, get to the first board meeting, and David start documenting everything. We need evidence that will hold up in court, not just recordings for a live stream. That night, David lay in his new bed, in his fake house, with his false identity, listening to the quiet sounds of suburban Sunset Meadows. Somewhere in this neighborhood, families were being targeted for harassment. Elderly residents were being bullied into selling homes they'd lived in for decades. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Welcome to Nevada, Mr. Morales. We look forward to working with you." David smiled in the darkness. They had no idea what they were in for. The first HOA board meeting was held in Patricia Hoffman's living room, which had been transformed into a war room. Maps of the neighborhood covered one wall with different properties marked in various colors. Red for problem properties, yellow for potential acquisitions, and green for compliant residents. David sat at Patricia's dining room table with the other board members. Harold Kim, a nervous accountant who kept checking his phone. Susan Wright, a stern woman in her 70s who took notes on everything. And Marcus Webb, a younger man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Before we begin, Patricia announced, "I'd like to welcome our new treasurer, David Morales." David nodded to the group, mentally cataloging their reactions. Harold looked relieved, as if David's